Let's take a look at this handwriting sample. So I'm asking creatives the question, what is my biggest creative block? And what I'm doing is looking at the handwriting to see how that block might be showing up. And maybe are there some other areas that are showing up in your handwriting to reflect a creative block? So in this case, this creative said, my biggest creative block is lack of time and energy. Then they also say, I'm never at a loss for ideas. I only lack energy and sometimes time. I also want to say before I start that this sample was written by someone who's left-handed. There are some different traits that I see in here that to me I don't weigh as heavily if they are left-handed. I'll just kind of say that for anybody who already knows handwriting analysis. But really I want to focus on like the time and energy and just start off by saying the I'm never at a loss for ideas. I can see that in the writing. You have a very strong upper zone. So when we talk about the upper zone, we're talking about like for example, in the H, the loops here, the loops and things that come up above the, I guess, smaller letters. Things that you'd see like the stem of the B and the T and things like that. So I can see that strength in terms of the ideas. When we compare it to the lower zone, and lower zone, we're looking at the things that come below the baseline, like the loops on like the Y or the G. I can see that you may not have quite as much physical energy for your mental energy or your creative ideas. So that might be an issue, just having enough energy. But one of the things that really stands out in terms of energy is the overall baselines. So the baselines are the kind of like invisible line that we write on. And typically we see a baseline that's relatively straight. And in this sample, we're seeing a baseline that is going down. We call it a descending baseline. So we can see that really throughout this sample. When we see a descending baseline, one of the things that it can suggest is just a lot of exhaustion. So it's kind of like somebody is tired. They're just, that energy, they feel very weighed down by life. Again, it might be physical exhaustion, but I always think it's also an emotional exhaustion. So when you look at it again, we think about the word depression, which is a word that basically means like going down. That energy is going down rather than going up or staying steady. So there may be, and I think it's this, I'm putting the thing here, a day job. You talk about the day job here. It might be rooted here in this energy that it, as you write, sucks all of the energy out of me. And that may literally be what's happening because we can see this in the whole sample. There's just an overall sense of feeling weighed down kind of by life. And so that is obviously going to affect your creative energy, your creative motivation as well. Another thing that I notice is that while your overall word spacing, that's the spacing between these words, is moderate to wide, your letter spacing, like if you look at the word have, the spacing or the biggest, the word biggest here, the GGs, your letters are kind of squeezed together where you have a narrow letter spacing. And what that can suggest is that there may be some creative inhibition. That might be a fear of leaving your creative comfort zone. It can also show up when you have a lot of shoulds or have tos, like I have to do it this way, or I really should do something else instead of being creative today. Essentially, these kind of squeezed letters that feel very compacted really give you a sense of not giving yourself the freedom to move through the world authentically you, not being able to relax on an inner level. And really, this can show up as playing small or not allowing yourself the room to take up more space in the world. And so I think this is really the root when we look at the letters and these kind of compacted letters together. I think that's really the root of the timing issue. And so I want to look at time because that is what you mentioned first and foremost. And when we look at the sample overall, we can see in a way how you are working with time, how you're managing time. When we look at the entire sample, we're kind of looking at the margins. And this sample I kind of put on a different sheet of paper, but the original sample was shown to me with the margins, which was awesome. And I would say the margins were about like here and here on the page. So just imagine that this is the edge of the page. What we can see with margins is we are writing, from one side to the other. So the right side of the page, we're writing kind of like into the future. We can see how you plan your time really by how you're using these margins. When we look at the first line, we can see a couple of things. Number one, you've really used that entire margin space in a very organized way. We can also see that the words are bigger. All these letters are bigger than they are at the bottom. That's pretty normal to see in a sample that you start off larger and then everything gets a little bit smaller. One of the things that you wrote to me was that you feel like you are more creative in the morning than you are in the evening. And that's what we're seeing here. This line is the morning, this line is the evening. So if we're looking at your day like this, we can see in the morning or when you start projects, there is a lot more space that you're giving yourself overall. The writing is larger. The only way that you can write with a larger script is it has to be more release. When you write smaller, it's contracted, okay, which gives you more focus, attention to detail. When you write larger, there is more release to your neuromuscular control. And so it's a way of giving yourself more freedom. So when you are first starting or right in the morning, there is more creative freedom that you feel and that you can express. So the mornings might be a better time to create if that's how you're feeling in the morning. As you go through your day, what we can see, hopefully you all can see this, you can see everything gets smaller, right? So this last line is only this long. First line is this long. The last line gets considerably shorter. We can also see that there's these gaps here as you're going down the page. Okay, and we're getting more and more space. What this is showing is that even though you could probably have put so yeah over here, you could definitely have put some more writing here on this line, you didn't choose to fill that space. So you have planned this row and said, mentally, no, I don't have enough room. I don't have enough space. I don't have enough space. Let me start over on a new line. And I never know exactly what people are thinking when I see their sample. I'm just going by the visual symbolism. So, is it that you don't have enough time, or is it that somewhere in your mind you are maybe unconsciously planning for less and less time, basically overly conserving your time, thinking, I just don't have enough time to fit it in. Schedule's getting tight. Even though we can see the schedule is not really getting tighter. You've got just as much time, but you are thinking about the time differently as the day goes on or as the week goes on, or maybe even as a creative project goes on. So that would be one thing I would say to look at is how might you be kind of over conserving your time maybe being a little bit too strict with your time? Is it that you really don't have the time, or is there something that is, making you kind of tell yourself that? And again, going back to these kind of squeezed letters, it can just show an internal difficulty with relaxing, right? Like the person who can never just sit and just do nothing. Like that would be something to practice. Now, one of the things that could be happening is just that you are using your time incorrectly for your creative style. And so when I look at this sample, one of the things that stands out is the variable baseline. So when we put this up here, we not only see a descending baseline, we also see a lot of variation in the baseline, meaning it kind of goes up and then down and up and down, and we also see a lot of variation just in size of letters, things like that. So there's lots of variability in the sample. And when we see a lot of variability, for me, it always means this is a creative person who needs spontaneity. They actually don't work well with structure. So if you are like, okay, at this time, and this time, I'm going to do this, that's not going to work for you. You need to allow yourself to be as spontaneous with your creative process as possible. And so, I would ask yourself, are you blocked because your creative space doesn't support your spontaneity and your need for variation? So when I see all this, I see somebody who needs to work in different creative mediums, for example, and maybe needs different times of the day. So my recommendation would be to set up a space that is dedicated, a dedicated space. Doesn't require you to take it down. Like it's not like your kitchen table and you got to take it down, set the plates, a dedicated space that you can set up with some simple tools. There are some traits here in your writing, like the simplification of some of these things, which tells me you know how to simplify things and be very efficient, which is a great thing to have. And maybe just take a couple of things that you really enjoy. Maybe you like working with Posca pens, or, I do collage, so I'm always going to have my glue stick around and my favorite scissors. Okay, so just a dedicated space somewhere that doesn't change. You don't have to set it up, take it down, that you can come to whenever you want to come to. And maybe you only do something creative for 5 minutes, but everything is already there, it's set, and it's ready for you. The other thing that I would suggest is these two words, day job. Examine this. Do some journaling around this. This space here, there's a wider space here, okay, between A and A, which suggests that there's a lot of thought. There's a pause in your thinking. Maybe you're trying to figure out how to describe your job. But when I see this, to me, whatever's after it, there's some, I was just going to say, psychospiritual issues around this. Whatever it is that there's some journaling that needs to happen around this day job. And what do you really want this to be? Working on manifesting what you want instead of this. Because the fact that there's a pause here tells me that there's something else that you wanted to write in here. You know what I mean? Like a different type of job. But I would say do some work just around this day job. What do you really want? What would you like to manifest instead of this day job? Take out the word day. What would you want to fill in here? Take out the word job. What would you want to fill in here? A day what? What kind of job? So to me, whenever I see these little pauses in writing, it just means there's some mental thought that's happening that's causing you to pause. And so to me, it shows a need to reflect on that a little bit more. And so I would also say just part of time management is learning how to relax into every moment. And so perhaps affirming, I always have plenty of time. I always have plenty of time might be really helpful for you, because I noticed that phrase, I don't have time, is repeated. And then I also want to give you a graphotherapy exercise. So let me show you. So graphotherapy is basically using your writing to help you with something. Essentially, graphotherapists believe in changing your writing, you can change your life. I don't actually like to give people changes to their actual writing. I like to give them just writing exercises, which are essentially kind of like drawing exercises. You may have done these as a child when you were learning cursive. A lot of times they do this as pre-work for learning cursive writing. And all you're doing is just these circles. Circles, 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 circles. And you see I've just done them across the page, just one page. This one is just loops. Okay, it's designed to be just loops across the page. The goal is to do this in a relaxed manner, to make these loops as big as possible. Don't go too fast, don't go too slow. You don't want the loops to get really tiny and tight. That's going to show up as tension. That's a reflection of tension. You don't want the loops to be overlapping each other. Okay, that's actually also another form of tension. But essentially you want some space between them and just keep a nice, consistent flow. This is a great exercise for relaxation. Usually when you do this, you will feel more relaxed after you get to the bottom of the page. I would suggest doing a page just on some regular computer page, just paper, just one page a day. It might also be great for you to do this right before you want to do something creative. And then you can take this page and maybe this is just the base of your drawing or painting or whatever creative project that you want to do. So this is just an idea for you to help work on that inner relaxation. And it's a great, just overall relaxing exercise. So I hope that gives you some insight and feedback into your biggest creative block. I do think the time and energy are really key here, but I think there might be some things that you can do overall. Some of it is going to be kind of mindset change and working through some journaling and dealing with some of the things that feel heavy in your life. But I think that there might be some shifts that you can see if you just work on some of those areas. Thank you so much for submitting your handwriting.